Hi, shalom, friends. Stereotypes are very hard to change because it's a stereotype. It doesn't mean it's really true. It might be an element of truth, but to undo the perception is very, very difficult. One of those stereotypes is the Jew who complains. There's a special word in Yiddish, which I'll tell it to you, I'm sure you've heard it before, Kvetch, which means complain, but it's more than complain. He's a Kvetcher. He's a person that seems to always find the negative much more readily than the positive. And part of the stereotype is that some retired Jewish mothers who are meeting daily on Miami Beach, they sit on the bench and they kvetch. What do they kvetch about? The children. This one's about that he doesn't call. This one is he has no money. This one is he's running around. He hasn't settled down. And this goes on until one of them says, stop. Sadie, no more kvetching. Tomorrow we're going to meet, but we're not talking about the kids. And the other two say, you're right. So they sit down, and it's a little bit awkward because usually someone makes a comment and the other one just takes it, and then in no time they're back to familiar territory. So it's very quiet until finally one of them says, "Ay," gives a sigh. A couple of minutes later, the other one gives a krech, "Ay," and the third one says, "I thought we weren't going to speak about the children." That's the stereotype. But I have proof from the Torah that stereotype is actually a falsehood. I don't know who made it up, maybe Hollywood, but it's absolutely not true. Look at the 5 books of Moses. The second book, the second Sefer, is called Shemos, and forever and ever, in the English translation, it's known as the book of Exodus, the book of redemption. And what do you think the opening verses are? The opening verses are that the Jewish people who started as a family of princes in the land of Egypt turned to be slaves. And they're not appreciated by anyone. And the king himself, though he knew the history of the land and knew how unjustified it was to accuse the Jews of anything less patriotic, after all, it was their Joseph that saved the country from starvation, he made himself as if he did not know Joseph. And it continues. They groaned and they worked very hard and they had to build storage houses. And yet, what do they call the Sefer? The book of Exodus? Couldn't it conceivably have been called the book of exile or the book of exile and of Exodus? So I would like to read into this obvious anomaly and say that maybe the Torah is teaching us, don't kvetch. The Torah is telling us there's going to be a certain amount of negativity or darkness, but concentrate on the idea of the sun that will be shining very shortly thereafter. In fact, one should accustom himself to see the darkness as a prelude to sunlight. I myself heard a remarkable insight from the Rabbi, who mentioned every sunset is actually a sunrise somewhere else. So there's no such thing as the sun is darkened. The sun is never darkened, or our perception of the sun is temporarily obscured. But somewhere else where we don't see the sun, someone else is actually seeing the sun. And then a short while later, we will see the sun. And that's why the Hasidic masters point out this wonderful teaching in the Torah itself. When you actually look at how many verses describe the suffering of the Jewish people in the land of Egypt, you'll find very few. Isolated verses. They worked very hard. Their suffering arose to God, and God heard their cry. But when you read about the process of leaving Egypt and the famous 10 plagues, the miracles that God makes to bring awareness that God's existence is found even in Egypt, and that how the Jewish people are his beloved firstborn, the Torah is very lengthy about that. In other words, there's much more emphasis put on redemption than there is the statements of the suffering. Why? It seems to me that amongst the many reasons we could offer a very simple one. The Torah is telling us that never emphasize or wallow in despair. Your job is to see the goodness and to emphasize goodness. You say, but one second, it's easy for someone to say that, but, the expression is when you're wearing the shoe that's too tight, you feel the pain. Everyone else says, oh, such a beautiful pair of shoes. Where'd you get it? And you're feeling uncomfortable. So what is this business about? Yeah, sure, it's easy for this guy to say, be positive. Well, it's not positive. It's painful. So I don't think it means that you shouldn't mention it or acknowledge it. It means put it in its proper place. Let me perhaps do something on a parallel thought. Unfortunately, I do not have the scientific papers in front of me, but I believe it to be true just from even common knowledge. And that is, you could criticize your children, and many people would like to consider it healthy criticism, or even more obscene, constructive criticism. And they say to themselves like this, if I don't criticize my child, who will? Everyone is so politically correct today that my child might have some serious flaws and will never even be brought to his awareness. So I love this child. This is my child, and it's my responsibility, and it's my privilege, and I will criticize to bring out his best. Maybe. If that's your motive, it sounds very noble. How effective do you think your criticism will be? So I'm going to give you a simple formula that seems to be out there. Your criticism is only effective if you could balance it with 4 times the amount by giving praise. In other words, remember, 4 compliments to every criticism. And you could challenge yourself. Honestly, you could. Just carry around a little pen and paper. And just whenever you say something about your kids, you're late again, or come on, hurry up, we got to do this, or get in and do your homework. Make a list of how many times you said something of criticism, and then ask yourself, or look on the paper, how many times did you compliment the kid? Boy, you're wonderful, you came on time. Wow, your homework was done. Wow, it's so nice to see you. You did this, you did that. I love your smile. So friends, if you could do 4 to 1, your criticism will be very effective because the person hearing it hears the love, concern, feels the warmth and closeness. So then they know that the criticism is coming from a good place. The other way, it's not really true. And don't kid yourself, just because you gave the kid dinner or drove him to school, to the kid, that's not enough proof of love. Somehow, children have a way of thinking that that's the job description of a parent. But when you compliment, they feel it, they hear it, they absorb it. And then when you criticize, the same thing. So 4 to 1. I'm wondering if we could actually do that formula in the Torah itself. I didn't try. Maybe you would like to try to see if that formula works in the Torah. But you'll see the Holy Torah that talks about, I know that you will be led astray and sin, is filled with Hashem loves you, and you are the people of God. So let's get rid of that stereotype, and let's change the word Kvetch. In fact, change the word Kvetch to Kvel. Kvel is a Yiddish word which means having pleasure and being happy. Don't kvetch, kvel. And if you gotta kvetch because it hurts, and when something hurts you express it, make sure you put it into the context of how much to praise. So, how are you feeling today? Don't kvetch, oh, I got this, I got that. How am I feeling today? Baruch Hashem. I had breakfast, I went to work, I have a loving wife, I have wonderful children, a long list. And by the way, I have a toothache. Okay, I understand, but it's in context, friends. Don't kvetch about your toothache only. Praise Hashem for the infinite kindness that He gave you. Anyway, whether or not scientifically it's correct 4 to 1, on a very basic level, it sounds right. Try it. There used to be a slogan, try it, you'll like it. I am sure if you try it, the other people will like it as well. Shalom.